All present, please welcome His Excellency John Murray, 4th Earl of Dunmore, the Royal Governor.
Good people of Virginia, subjects of His Majesty King George III, good afternoon. I'm very pleased to make myself available to you after the very tumultuous and, dare I say, correct events that happened just yesterday. I understand egregiously and will get directly to the point which you wish to address, as I have addressed for this past almost 2 days. I understand well that you are concerned as such. I understand well, indeed, that you wish to be informed, to get complete clarity, hence my presence here before you. I will say the exact same words to you that I said to the City Council of Williamsburg, that I also repeated to Mr. Peyton Randolph, the Speaker of the House of Burgesses, and that is this. The gunpowder was indeed removed upon my order from the public magazine in the city of Williamsburg. It was removed by Royal Sailors and Marines upon my order. It was done so over the threat of an enslaved person insurrection in the county of Surrey on the other side of the James River. It was given to them because these are the only forces with which I can legally and lawfully command at present in the colony of Virginia, without putting undue expense upon you. I have also stated again that I will, if it is that powder is needed for any insurrections whatsoever, they will be returned to the city in a half-hour's time. That powder is in the possession of Captain and Lieutenant Henry Collins. They are the same person. He holds both ranks. He is the captain of His Majesty's ship, the Magdalene. It is currently anchored at Jamestown, with the Marines under his command handling the powder well. That is precisely where it is, and I did order it. My reason for doing so is quite simple. As I have stated, these are the only forces available to me to deal with the insurrection that the enslaved people in Surrey are threatening just now. As such, I would not want to threaten you or inconvenience you at all. So the professional soldiers will deal with it if necessary. Hopefully these measures that I've taken will dissuade any such insurrections from happening. Also, I would be remiss if I did not mention the obvious fact that there are armed men walking these streets of Williamsburg just now who answer to private citizens, not the public. As such, it would not be safe or secure to leave such powder within this place for anyone's safety. Heavens, why would you do so? Why indeed would you want gunpowder to be in the hands of men who answer to no one? Also, allow me to assure you this. All private stores of gunpowder are within that public magazine. The only powder that His Majesty's forces have removed are the ones stamped with His Majesty's seal and are marked for public use, for the use of official military forces of Virginia. I would not rob anyone. They have not robbed anyone. If you have any stores of gunpowder within that magazine, they are still there. But the military stores of gunpowder have been removed for the exact reasons that I have said. So as such, you may rest easy knowing that the proper officials have their hands upon that gunpowder and are marshalling it well in exact accordance with my orders and the recommendation of the Council as well. Now, that said, I know it is a bit of a rarity for you to have an audience with me. So at this point, I shall make myself available to any questions that you may have, so that you may put them to me, and I may further assuage any fears and allay any concerns that you may have upon this or any other subject. By all means, this is your opportunity to speak with me, and I'm very pleased to do so. So if you bring them to the fore, I'll answer them directly.
Well, thank you, Your Excellency, for even allowing the time for us to speak with you. Now, friends, if you all have any questions whatsoever for Lord Dunmore, please write them in the comments section now, and we will try to answer as many of those questions as possible while we are in his presence. Now, sir, I know this is quite a fascinating time here in Virginia, especially over the last few days. Now, you did explain why you were why you were inspired to remove the gunpowder and your reasoning behind that. But can you tell us, was anyone in disagreement with you from within the palace? Was your family in agreement with this? Was your team that answers to you within the palace, were they in agreement? Did you face any sort of opposition, or was this your sole decision alone?
Initially, I do not need to confer with anyone else but myself upon these issues. However, as I am a married man, I of course conferred with Lady Dunmore of this, as I would expect any of you gentlemen to confer with your own wives upon any subject. This is common parlance and is often done. As far as my personal staff, Captain Foy and Mr. Menzies, they agreed in toto with the actions there. I indeed also got the recommendation of Colonel Byrd of His Majesty's Royal Council to do the same. As such, truly, I did not need, by law, anyone else's permission to do what I did. I'm the Commander-in-Chief of Virginia. I can simply order gunpowder and forces anywhere I see fit, so long as they've been afforded and accorded under the Virginia Constitution. As this is gunpowder, I can simply command it. But I will have you know that the entirety of my staff at the palace were in agreement with me. Also, I did it under order. It was no secret back in January, it was posted in the papers, that Lord Dartmouth did send around a letter to all the royal governors to secure any stores of gunpowder that might be coming in or out of the colonies because of, well, quite frankly, what occurred in Boston. We're all aware of what happened there 2 years ago. Well, a year and a half ago, approximately. So because of that, getting hands upon this powder was necessary. It was ordered. Every royal governor was ordered to do it. You could have easily read it in the Gazette that this indeed was an order that was handed out. It was. As such, I saw no reason to act upon this order in any way until this insurrection in Surrey came to my knowledge. That is when I took action, and I felt it necessary to do so. But all within the executive are in agreement.
I see. Well, thank you for that, sir. Now, there are a few questions coming in, and Gary is very curious about, well, how will you now defend Williamsburg without the gunpowder?
I see. Gary, thank you for your inquiry. As I have stated, Williamsburg is not under threat, and the Royal Marines and Royal Sailors on the Magdalen and the Fowey have this powder well in hand. Williamsburg does not need to be defended from anyone. The only risk that I've seen within the streets of Williamsburg are these independent companies which have been formed up without the order of myself and without the official order of the House of Burgesses. These men are the only threat there. And truly, these men, honestly, if they would simply put away their arms, can do so. But they will have no public powder from me at all. Williamsburg does not need to be defended. It is a peaceable place. As I've said, the trouble is not here.
I see, sir. Now, we are curious. We know you are not a Virginian by birth, but do you happen to like Virginia? Would you say that you might dislike Virginia and its citizens? Can you speak to that?
I'm very happy to speak upon this. It has been a long misnomer that I dislike Virginia. This is not true. I was hesitant in my coming to Virginia 4 years ago. This is very, very true, as it has been well reported. Prior to this, I held the governorship of New York, that colony, and I held it for a year. As such, truly, I enjoyed my time there, and honestly, I will be blunt about this. The weather in Virginia is quite harsh. I am from Scotland, as you are well aware, and such my constitution is used to colder climes. So is that of my family. It is not that I dislike Virginia, it is just that I was very concerned about the climate of Virginia. Truly, my two predecessors in this position, both Governor Bartetort and Lieutenant Governor Fauquier, were both felled by that same weather. As such, I believe that anyone who is not from Virginia should be concerned as such with the weather, about what it might do to someone's constitution. As such, overheating of someone's body can easily fell you. This was my main concern and my reluctance to arrive in Virginia, to see if truly I was hardy enough for it. Once I determined that I was, and that my family could also withstand it, I was very quick to bring my wife and children here as quickly as was deemed safe to be. I would not have brought my family here if I disliked Virginia. I do like it rather well. I just simply was worried for my family's safety, as any of us should be.
Well, Your Excellency, thank you for answering that. Michael has some concerns. He's concerned about the act of removing the gunpowder at night, and maybe you can give us some insight about if you felt that this was within your right to remove the gunpowder, why exactly did you remove it in the middle of the night? Michael is concerned that that could appear to be deceitful.
Michael, I completely understand your inquiry. Firstly, allow me to address your question in two parts, Michael. Firstly, this. I do not feel that I have the right to move it. I do, by law, by both Virginia law and English law, have the right to move that powder. That is a simple fact. I do not feel that I have the right. I do have that right. Any royal governor has that right. Any county lieutenant has that right within their county. However, my order as the royal governor does supersede that. So let us address simply that. I do have that right by law. Secondly, I did it early in the morning to avoid the exact stir that I had hoped would not happen later in the day. I wanted to cause no alarm. I wanted to cause no stir at all. So I did it in the dead of night, where no one would be put out, put back, afeared by the appearance of Royal Marines marching through the town. Everyone knows that the sight of soldiers anywhere, regardless of the colour of coat that they wear, that is an issue of fear. I did not wish to threaten the people of the city with such at all. So simply when everyone was asleep, and there were naught but farmers and enslaved people working at the market next to it, that is when I ordered it to be taken, so as not to interfere with any of the business of Williamsburg.
I see, sir. Now, Bob is curious about something you said earlier about people walking about the city with weapons. Bob says, well, exactly who are those people that are walking around our city of Williamsburg if they are not a part of your guard? Who are they, and why are they moving about with weapons?
A very important question, Bob. Thank you for bringing it to the fore. I do appreciate it. These men are what is known as independent companies. Now, what this means, independent company, this is not a militia company. This is not a regimental company. This is men who, independently of any supervision, are mustering on their own, arming themselves, putting themselves to the drill, meaning military maneuvers, practicing publicly, in some cases committing the crime of a fray, meaning to cause and spread fear within a city. These is who these men are. These are private subjects of Virginia who have taken it upon themselves to drill as such. Now, it is no secret, as you've no doubt also read in the Gazettes, that the Continental Congress meeting in Philadelphia has ordered these companies to form across all of America. They have no authority to do so. They have no granted authority from any official source. This is the truth. And as such, these companies are just that. They are private citizens who have armed themselves, some with musket, mostly with fowling pieces and other smaller arms, some with hatchets, some with sword, some with bayonet if they have them, marching about in hunting shirts. Nobody near a professional army, which indeed makes them dangerous, for they lack discipline. They lack a titular head to keep them in line. So this is who these men are. This is why we must all be wary of their existence.
I see. Now, Your Excellency, you spoke earlier about an insurrection in Surrey County, I believe. Now, Craig has a pretty direct question for you that the people in the city are wondering about. Do you have intentions of freeing the enslaved people here within the city? Now, we know over half of the city of Williamsburg is in bondage. And Craig is just curious, do you have any sort of action like that? I think he's wondering what other sort of acts you plan to take while here in the city?
Thank you for your question, Craig. I will answer very, very directly to this. No, I am not going to remove anyone's property from them at all. I am not going to free any slaves unless act of government brings them forward, and they are manumitted by act of government, as is in accordance with Virginia law. Those would be the only enslaved people whom I would free at this juncture. I have no intent of doing that at all. Heavens, why would I send Royal Marines to put down an insurrection of enslaved people if I intended to free them?
Well, sir, do you have any specific thoughts about the institution of slavery as a whole? I know Virginia, again, is not your home, and you've had extensive traveling before. Has your opinion or your perspective on slavery changed since you've been serving as the royal governor here?
I will tell you this. Until I arrived in America, I did not own a single slave. Not a single one. Do I own slaves now? Yes. Yes, I do. Mainly they work my lands around Portobello in York County. But truly, I did not encounter them at all until I arrived here. As such, as it is my duty as the Royal Governor of Virginia to uphold the laws of Virginia and hold them as they are, the law of Virginia says clearly that slavery is legal, that you may indeed buy and sell people, and you may trade them as you see fit, as long as all proper compensation is had. There are also many laws upon the books in Virginia regulating such an institution. My duty is to maintain that law, regardless of my own opinion, regardless of how I may personally feel, because my duty in Virginia's government is to hold the place of the king that the king holds in the Parliament in Great Britain. So I am the executive, so as such it is my duty to steer the ship, as it were, but also to allow the elected officials in Virginia, the House of Burgesses, and the appointed officials in Virginia, the Council of Virginia, to create laws and to give my assent or to give my disapproval of them thereupon. Usually, if the Burgesses and Council come together and create a law, I will assent to it. That is my duty. The King does the same thing in England with the Parliament. That is his duty, to ensure that laws are being put forward properly. As such, because the law in Virginia says that it is legal, I must remove my own personal opinions from it and maintain the law as it exists.
Well, Your Excellency, speaking of personal opinions, Arden has a questions about perhaps the opinions of your superiors who you answer to. And Arden is curious, if you were to be perceived by the crown to have failed, or perhaps your team has been affected, would be affected by certain shortcomings in your performance as the royal governor, Arden is curious about what would be the ramifications for you and your family, including your wife and children, if you are to be recalled home.
Thank you, Arden, for your question. I have a good feeling, Arden, that you understand exactly what would happen if I have been found to be displeasing, if I have been found to be ineffective in my office. Very simply, I will be recalled, which means that I will return back directly to London to answer to the Board of Trade and to answer to Parliament for what I've done. Thereon, I would simply either return to the House of Lords, of which I am a member, or I would simply return to my lands in Scotland, in between Edinburgh and Stirling. That is where my lands exist just now. My family, of course, will come with me. As far as the further ramifications, that will not be up to me, that will be up to my superiors, truly. But if that is the case, and they do recall me, then it is my duty as a sworn officer of His Majesty and a sworn governor of Virginia to adhere to that. That is what men of honor do. We stick to our word. So that is exactly what I will do. If I am recalled, I will go. I will not be pleased about it because no one enjoys a sea voyage, but still, I will go. And I will face whatever punishment awaits for me with my head held high, as I am a man of honor.
So, sir, we are curious. Before you arrived in Virginia, you came from New York.
Yes.
And feel free to answer as openly as you can. Did you feel adequately prepared to take on the role of royal governor here in Virginia? And specifically, what about your prior experience in New York did you carry into your role as the royal governor here?
Well, I've long heard about the appropriate, what is the correct word I'm looking for? The opinions that Virginians have of themselves, the appropriate way they carry themselves as good, loyal, and faithful subjects of His Majesty. So this, of course, put every question that I had a bit at ease. Again, as I said earlier, it was the climate that was my apprehension, not the people, truly. Having a good, well-educated, well-thought of, and well-respected body of men, such as that which exists within the House of Burgesses and His Majesty's Council in Virginia, this makes my life much, much easier, generally speaking. So as such, when I arrived here in 1771, the first thing I did was I took the necessary time to familiarize myself with as many people as I could, to familiarize myself with the laws of Virginia, and to call the Burgesses in when I felt prepared to have them come forward and legislate on behalf of Virginia. Now, I am not the only one to do this. His Majesty has done the same thing with Parliament. Indeed. Other governors have done the same. But New York does operate differently from Virginia. There is more of a directness that exists in New York, which, as myself, as I am a Scot, it's clear, that is much more akin to the way I am doing things. However, Virginia does have a soft hand. Virginia is a very, very proud colony, with good reason. It is the largest and most populous colony in His Majesty's realm. However, they must also realize that they tend to be the most well-reasoned, or at least they're seen that way. So, in many ways, they need to remember who they are.
I see. Well, Sir, Susie is a bit concerned, and she's wondering if you have the same concerns as she does about citizens here in Virginia. What if they were to storm the palace, as was the case in Massachusetts? Do you believe something like that could happen here?
Susie, I betrayed myself in my reaction just now. Yesterday, that almost happened here. That is my home. My family, my wife and children are inside. I will do anything to protect my wife and children, as I expect you would do the same to protect your family, Susie. I would expect anyone within Virginia, or New York, North Carolina, England, Scotland, Wales, every part of His Majesty's realm, to do the exact same when threatened as such. Thankfully, Mr. Peyton Randolph, the Speaker of the House of Burgesses, as well as the City Council of Williamsburg, stopped those independent companies from doing that. So what you bring up, if they might do it, they almost did. And if they had done that, well, let us not speak of what ifs. Let us not speak of these things. We must look forward, not what might have happened, only what has happened. And all that occurrence is doing is proving that moving the gunpowder was a correct action for me to take.
Well, since you've assumed the title of Royal Governor, have you had many moments where you have feared for the safety of your wife and your children because of differing politics or differing beliefs here within the city?
Firstly, I was appointed as the Royal Governor of Virginia. I did not assume the title. I assumed the office, but I was appointed, just to be clear as far as that is concerned. As the Burgesses make it very clear what the difference one word can make. I did not fear for my family's life at all. I would not have invited them here at all if I felt that there were any risks to their safety whatsoever. Heavens, who would? That wasn't until yesterday. That was the first time where there was any sort of political risk to my family.
Well, sir, while we're speaking of your family, Gary was just very curious about how did you and Lady Dunmore meet? Is there a very specific romantic story that you would like to share? We're just a bit curious since we are speaking on your family at this moment.
I was introduced to her ladyship by her father, the Earl of Galloway. So as such, truly, I was serving under him and with his son in the army in the last war. When I attended a function at his house, at his estate in Galloway in Scotland, that is where I first laid eyes upon my dear wife, the Countess of Dunmore, Lady Charlotte. And it is one of those situations in which I knew instantly how I felt. However, the way that I feel is not necessarily always what must be taken into account in such things. So after a courtship of some months, she did finally agree to become my wife. And without her, I would not be sitting here now.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for that lovely memory, Gary.
Indeed. I don't think many of us knew that. So it was nice to hear that from you, sir. Now, some people want to move back into understanding about the roles and the position that you hold. Martin is curious, was there a deficiency in your performance while you were in New York that caused you to be appointed governor here in Virginia? Was that the reason?
Martin, thank you very much for this inquiry. Again, this is a concept of some, not debate, but misinformation being spread back and forth. As Virginia is the largest and wealthiest colony, it is generally thought that this is the highest position amongst the royal governorships that can be had for anyone to hold. As this is the first colony, the largest colony, if you hold this one, you have a higher status, if it were, amongst other royal governors. That is not entirely true, but that is how it is generally thought of in England. And as the governor of New York, while I performed, I believe, well, and while the people of New York also believe that I performed well, it is true the actions and not the machinations, that is the wrong word, the influence of Lady Dunmore herself with Her Majesty the Queen, that had me assigned to Virginia. Also, the unfortunate and untimely death of Lord Botetourt, my predecessor in this position. Had he not died, there would be no reason for me to come here. And as such, because I was a good mediator, a good assuager of people, and a good arranger and organizer of matters in New York. New York was in a terrible state when I arrived. Just prior to my arrival, there was a series of riots and a series of influxes within, a convulsion within, if you will, New York occurring. And the aftermath of which I stepped directly into when I assumed office there. As such, I simply had to put all of that aside, end all of that, and put things back together. So, in effect, even though I enjoyed my time in New York and enjoyed the people there, it seemed that such a reorganization, such a good even hand at righting a ship, if you will, was needed in Virginia. So that is the reason that I was given as to why I was assigned and relocated to Virginia by His Majesty's will, also through the influence of Lady Dunmore. So there was no apprehension, there was no deficiency in action. If anything, it's because I was so efficient in New York that I was assigned to Virginia.
Well, Sir, Tracy is wondering, based off of what you just shared with us, do you have any regrets? Any regrets regarding coming from New York to Virginia? Any regrets of any of your performance? Is there anything that you would do differently, if you could?
Tracy, thank you for this. I'm going to be very, very true at this moment. Very much a father and very much a man. The only regret that I have is that my young son William passed away when I was assigned to New York. My son William was born in 1763. He unfortunately passed away from illness at the age of 10 in 1773 when I was here in Virginia. His illness first arrived when I was the governor of New York. I was very, very saddened that I could not be there for him, that I could not aid him in any way. The only regret that I have is that my son no longer lives and I was not there to assist he nor Lady Dunmore in his passing.
Now, sir, I know we are slowly coming to the end of our time together. We know that we want to be mindful of your next appointment, and we know quite a bit's happening here. But just want to ask briefly, there's a few people just curious about your background, including Emma and Pam. Now, they know that you're from Scotland, and they are really enjoying listening to you and hearing you. They're curious. Can you tell us a little bit about specifically where in Scotland you grew up and just some of your those earlier years and background? Because we only know you as the royal governor, but could you tell us a little bit about your past?
Of course. Emma and Pam, was it?
Yes.
Emma and Pam, thank you for inquiring about my past. My lands in Scotland sit in between the cities of Stirling and the cities of Edinburgh, a bit beyond the corner of the Firth of Forth. Those are all of my lands in there, between there. That is what I personally hold as mine. My home is there just now. If you find yourself in Scotland, you can easily find my estate. As such, that is not where I was raised. See, those were my uncle's lands, my uncle, the second Earl of Dunmore. I was raised in my father's household, who was a general for, if you can believe it, Bonnie Prince Charlie. Yes, I served as a page to Bonnie Prince Charlie back in the 45, by order of my father. That occurred. So in my youth, I attended Eton. I was schooled there until that rebellion occurred. I was simply following my father's orders. So I attended upon him there, because who would I be if I did not listen to my father and heed his words? So that education there at Eton was, of course, some of the best that can be acquired for anyone, whether it be they gentlemen or noblemen. But then being pulled out and thrust into a war that I did not understand, that I did not truly believe in, but was commanded to all the same, because that is the duty of a soldier. That is what I learned what it is to be a soldier. And as such, serving Bonnie Prince Charlie when he was defeated at Culloden, and thus his rebellion was put down, I was in jeopardy. I truly was, because my father was a traitor to the king. Fortunately, my uncle, his brother, the second Earl of Dunmore, served Prince George II, who was the monarch at the time. By served, I mean as a general. They were generals on opposite sides. So as such, brother versus brother on opposite ends of the battlefield, there perhaps to save one another, or perhaps they are just standing for what they wanted to, what they believed. As such, my uncle had no children, so I always knew that I was going to be his heir, which is why I found my involvement with Bonnie Prince Charlie so puzzling. Following that battle and following the fall, my father was put on house arrest, his crime of treason being commuted, getting a pardon from His Majesty King George II to house arrest. So that is when I stayed with him until I entered royal service myself as a captain. I served there until my uncle died, thus making my father the third Earl of Dunmore. Then my father died, making me the fourth Earl of Dunmore. I was serving in France when I was told. So that is how I was brought up, as the common parlance goes.
Your Excellency, Craig just informed me that he feels that based upon some of your actions, it seems as if you have a very unpleasant disposition in regards to native people in the land that you occupy, and he's wondering, do you intend to kill native people, the natives of this land?
Craig, thank you very much for this inquiry. Prior to the actions happening here, just some months ago, I was engaged in a war against the Shawnee, the Mingo, and the Wyandot in the western reaches of Virginia for the protections of the Virginians living out there. Now, as such, this was a war happening between peoples living in Virginia. In many ways, this was a civil war. The native peoples living out there, which I've just mentioned, causing grievances, causing attacks against those who are English, such as ourselves. and then these reprisals going back and forth in a bloody fashion. I went there to put a stop to it, to put an end to it. And I did just that with the aid of Colonel Lewis, culminating in the Battle of Point Pleasant. So at that culminating battle, that's when it stopped. I do not intend to harm any native person, be they Shawnee, Mingo, Wyandot, Cherokee, Pamunkey, Nottaway, or any other person of original descent living in Virginia, unless they intend to go to war against us. That is my duty as the Royal Governor of Virginia, to protect Virginians.
Thank you for stating that, Your Excellency. Now, again, I know we would love to have an additional amount of time to chat with you, but we know that we all have to part. And so, sir, the final question that we have for you as the citizens of Virginia, how do you think Virginia could best move forward?
This is a very good question, a very tough question, but also one that affects every Virginian. For there are multiple ways that we can go forward upon this. We can be despots and start hurling stones, start hurling shots, start hurling everything else at each other. Or we can remember our heads. We can think for ourselves. We can think clearly. We can remember that this is Britain, that this is Virginia, this is not Massachusetts, that by matters which are done legislatively, politely, to each other's faces, this is how we operate. Because everything that is occurring in Virginia is happening because, quite frankly, there are a few leading the rest. There are some men here, and you know their names, you know who they are, who are pressing matters for their own ends. They are not taking into account anyone else but their own ends. So my invitation to you, people of Virginia, is to ask them why. To consider for a moment why a wealthy man is going to do a certain thing. Why is a wealthy man going to put forward an idea and tell you that it is a good idea, that it is a good course of action, even though what affects him affects you not at all? This is what we must do, because if we simply follow blindly and we simply do what those who are above us wish to do, then we are no better than the French. We are not being British at that point. We are Britons, all of us. And as such, we should question and we should inquire, just as you have done with me. But we should not do that only to me, but you should do that to everyone who claims to be your leader. Investigate why they want to do things. Investigate if you agree with these things. Because heavens, you're not sheep, you're people. And I've found that most of you are good people. So by all means, people of Virginia, think before you act.
Thank you all so much for your continued support of Colonial Williamsburg. Thank you to our donors for your generous support that make programs like this possible. We appreciate your viewership and support.